Truggy. Sick. It's a Truggy, dude. It's a Truggy, bro. Old Armorcraft Truggy. This guy's getting a full reskin, so right now we're just assessing the panels. We're going to do full reskin, so all side panels, some front panels here to cover the header, some kind of like hood panel, and then a radius windshield. So we're going to give this thing a full breath of fresh air and get her back to kind of current and updated. Originally, I wanted to cover the whole process as far as like the reskinning of the Truggy and starting with the old panels and getting, you know, the Zeus button orientation and layout on the chassis right, and then, you know, showing just, I guess, copy and paste of doing the original skins and kind of consolidating them and stuff. But I think what's more important and what I'd really like to focus on here is taking your, like, I guess your rough draft or your just your like initial panel, enclosure panel and skin, and taking it to the point where you can, you know, implement like a really nice layout that's drawn through the chassis, and walk you through how I do that, and then also just kind of the steps as far as like putting a step roll into there for your pattern, kind of running through the bead roller stuff. The actual bead rolling will be its own episode, but this is definitely something where you can get stuff from it, and then just kind of showing the finish work and the process involved with all that stuff. So I want to wrap up the initial reskin, which is just like getting, you know, ding, 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 just skinning the thing, putting stuff together, roughed out, and then I want to start back with our design and really just put it down on the car. So Zeus button thing too, I just want to cover generally like what your quarter turn fastener situation is. You know, I'm talking about it, and obviously you hear the term Zeus button or quarter turn. It comes from aviation. We'll drop some facts on that, and then I just want to show you what I use and just like the actual pieces that construct an actual quarter turn fastener. I order most of my Zeus button parts through Clarke in Corona. I usually deal with Jeff Black. They're a great resource for fabrication parts and off-road parts in general. I'm doing a little restock here tonight, but you can see like I have all, you know, springs. I just ordered in a bulk quantity. They go fast. And then I just have, you know, a select container for these guys. So there's a couple different kinds of, you know, spring plates, springs, buttons. My go-to are these guys. I like them because they have a provision, like they have space, and I just think the packaging and the layout on these is better than just like something where you'd weld it all the way through like this. These kind of plates, these spring plates are great because you can put a break in them if you have to like go out and reach somewhere. You know, you can break this anywhere that works for your application and then weld it. But like my go-to for, you know, most panel work is just these guys, and I can pop, you know, like I said, I think I mentioned it, is just getting appropriate tacks here before you start welding them, where you burn into the tack just so you don't, it's such thin material that if you start your weld and you start burning not into a tack at the end, it'll just usually just eat the corner if you're not paying attention. So it's a good method. I always just do 4 tacks on these. That usually secures it too when you're using your centering tool to find your hole, your locator. So usually use these spring plates, number 6 spring, and then number 6 Zeus button. I always do countersunk. Try to get a focus in on there. I always run countersunk I do have some button heads here, usually just for like mock-up when I'm just roughing the panels in, so I don't have to actually put a dimple in the panel. That's your standard button head. You can kind of see for obvious reasons why it's called that. So, you know, and these are kind of like self-contained, like spring-loaded Zeus buttons, so they stay and just keep the party to themselves. So obviously, the program goes here. You know, you have 2 pickups on each side, and that's where you'd rivet this spring. The spring is spaced here, like on the tab. It's actually this way, but it's just gonna, let's do that. So the spring's spaced out like that. And then your quarter turn goes in there, and it's got kind of a cam lock mechanism where it goes in over the panel, sandwiches the panel onto the spring plate, sandwiches it here, and then you click it, and that spring is what holds the tension, and it causes kind of a rigidity, like a non-vibration spring-loaded panel. It's awesome. It's a great application for off-road and for aviation. The dimples that you see, like I said, I'm going to cover this stuff in a completely, like, you know, separate Fab Diaries 101 on just an episode primarily on just Zeus button etiquette and like a run through on like the general procedures you'll kind of want to know when you start to lay this stuff down. This tool here, it gets used a lot, so you can see like the washers have made a home here. I'm trying to get the focus. You know, I just drive this thing, and this is just something you can use an impact with. And it literally is just like a dimple die, you know, or a flared hole maker. So I always just do a certain size hole here, and then it's a press. You just put your material in here, and bing, and that thing sandwiches. It's just got a female and a male. I just wanted to give you guys a quick one on this. We'll do a full episode on all of the Zeus button quarter turn history and procedure when doing these things on motorsports applications. So one of the things you'll see that I'm doing here is I cut off this middle section of tabs that was here. It was wishy-washy, and what's really nice with a car, especially for the end result, is to have almost a grid system of Zeus buttons. So what I did is I just kind of took my measurement from button 1 here to button 2 and split the difference, got that guy, inserted a new button in the middle of these two, and then that's going to be my center line to kind of get a Zeus button system, or a button plate system going all the way across this thing. And that just gives a more streamlined look, and it doesn't look as cattywampus. And then whenever you're doing bead rolls too, your shapes and designs can kind of be symmetrical like that too. All right, so reskin is complete. I got this big pile of parts down here, and they have Dynamat, or like similar to Dynamat on the backside, so they're super heavy. I'm gonna get the car outside. You can see I have like a rough layout already on here. I don't know how spooky this design is, or I really am gonna press on these 2 areas. The rest is just kind of to figure out flow. I just have exhaust on for mock-up, but you can see like it's a little rickety here. It's just held on by 1 hose clamp, no V-band. So I'm gonna get this thing out of the shop, clean up everything, And see, this is just kind of how your floor gets. And I've cleaned this twice already today. So that's just kind of the way it goes with doing aluminum. It just gets everywhere and it's dirty and crazy. But anyways, the reskin is pretty much done on this thing. I got a lot of the panels, the Zeus buttons that were there, I already used, and then I kind of just refigured one line of these things, or redid one line. So this section of buttons that goes across, I cut off just because they were kind of wishy-washy, and made them a consistent kind of grid. Also consolidated the panels before. This was 2 panels, so it went 1 panel split at the bump stop, another panel, and then this was also 2 panels, so it was panel here with like a crease. You can see where there's like double buttons, so that's where the seam was. So consolidated panels just to clean it up. So it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And like I mentioned, the front guy wraps. I think we're gonna do another panel in here, but right now I'm really itching to figure out the bead roll layout and the venting layout. So like I said, I'm gonna move the car out, park it probably perpendicular to the bay door, somewhere where I'm not just sitting in the sun, and then I'll be able to really see it from far away and do kind of a tape mock-up for perspective and just see how the flow goes. Riche or richer? You decide. Only messed up 1 panel this time. That's usually my rate. I mess up at least 1. So right on par here. So a couple pieces. I'm kind of a hoarder with aluminum, so I'll probably save 1. I'll scrap the rest. God, I can't get rid of them. All right, so shop is decently cleaned from the spot. So what I'm gonna do here, I got this thing outside. I've just kind of thought about it. It's gonna be a lot easier for me to figure out layout if I can just do this digitally. Take some pictures, so side view, rear 3/4, almost rear 3/4, like that. And then definitely this front kind of 3/4. Just to figure out this area. I want to get a couple images on my phone of the car as a whole. I'm going to do a couple with the tape on there, then I'm going to take the tape off. Then I'm going to load these into my computer and to draw over them in Photoshop and just go through, like I'll be able to do 10 examples of layout on here and figure out which one's best. And I'll also talk to the client and just see if he likes one more than the other, or like certain things on different examples, and we'll combine those and we'll find a final one, and then bright and early tomorrow morning I can start executing this thing without having to just sit here with tape like a caveman and just go over and over and over trying to find something right. The other thing about getting this thing laid out into the computer and digitally is I can not just see this thing live, but I can, zoom out on my screen and see what that graphic and what the layout, not just the bead roll, but the cutouts where the mesh will go, I can see how that's gonna look from far away. So I'm gonna get this thing dialed and then get some drawing going tonight. Depending on the project or the finish on the tin work, I have some sheets that are a little bit more roughed up and scuffed, and if I know that this stuff's all going to be fluffed and buffed and there's not going to be like a grain finish, I kind of strategically pick those pieces pertaining to the job or the design. If I know I'm going to just be able to DA a bunch of stuff, then I'll use the pieces that aren't as good and save the good pieces for the show and shine areas. Every car kind of gets the same treatment when it leaves here. Everything's on a two-tone program, everything's fluffed and buffed, like it's never gonna get powder coat, and even if it does get powder coated, we know it is. Unless we're doing it, then the car is gonna leave under the condition and the presentation of it being raw forever. So it's wiped down, pretty solid here. This is our last view before we start executing the panels with detail. See like the capture here, so this will get like a step bead roll so they're level, even though they're really tight. And then obviously ventilation, you have your headers hiding back here. You have a secondary panel, which is like steel that's just tacked. It's kind of interesting. That's interesting too, little hose guy. That's a grommet or a protector. So that's it. Go sending tonight in the computer. Go work on another vehicle for the rest of the day. Truggy's back inside. It's raining. We're doing a little operation on a front bumper out the door here. Kind of interesting looking. So she's back in. Spent some time last night getting some designs finalized. I got them printed on tabloid size, which is like 11 by 17, just as a reference. So this is what we're going for. That was design 1. Then we got design 2. So we're actually gonna run design 2. You can see there's a partial bead roll on the back, like a step, that doesn't go all the way. There's just not enough room. It's too thin of a space to really dial like a complete sealed shape. So I'm gonna lead off by the sway bar mount, come out, and then let me get a zoom on this thing. So lead off on the sway bar mount there, come out, whip back around, dive back into the bump stop. That'll be that rear panel. Ventilation panel, so that'll just be a big cut. You can see the style bead roll that's going to also add rigidity but really add the character to the truck is going to be like a kind of a level profile. Dive back in, run the parameter here, then kind of favor some shape around the exhaust, dive back down, dip. That's going to be stepped down, and then there'll be a cutout as well that's going to live in that step. The front, that original wrap area where the you know, like the apular down tube is, where we have it kind of wrapping around and indexing, that shape will stay the same up here, and then it'll taper in for the step, you know, and follow it around. And then obviously we have this kind of one. This is similarly styled. I almost think I might run what we have on number 1 here, and I'll just put this shape into the front here. So that's what we got. That's what's gonna go down. So time to party. So this is our main line. That's that guy there. So I've just been kind of figuring out like the reference I took, like, oh, well, what's the scale? And you can, I mean, it's 1-to-1 scale. So if I just separate the Zeus buttons there, it's almost in the middle, and that's kind of a good reference there. Those are those two guys. So I've just got a string that's telling me the truth, because if I just do, since there's like surface changes, like the body kicks out and then it goes back out again, the best thing to do is just hang a string, because from far away, that's what you're gonna see is like that straight profile. So I've got this top one done. I'm gonna kind of figure out what we're doing here, because this is kind of progressive. It starts narrower here and it goes wider, and you know, it comes out and then it comes back in. So I'm gonna probably figure those out too. I mean, I got to figure it all out. I think I'm gonna do that next though, and then I'm gonna figure out our bottom profile line. So pretty excited to see this thing come together. See, if I just draw on this thing with a marker, first off, it doesn't show up as much. This is like tape is like a bold way to express the initial shapes. Once you get the initial shape locked in, then I can go back and fine tune. I can like even do tape, and then I can draw like my fine line with a marker, and even if it's partially on the tape, I'll pull the tape off and then I'll transfer it over to the aluminum. So this just helps me like pull big lines, and it's almost like drawing through, or pulling them big and not just focusing on the details. And that's what gets like these big shapes translated crossed onto the aluminum in a fashion where it makes sense, and it's not just me doing, if I do a line with a Sharpie on here and I bead roll that, when I bead roll it, it might look completely different, because the bead roll is going to add such a surface change that it'll be profound in a way that the marker's not going to show, or the pen's not going to show. So this at least gets like my big stuff handled. If that makes any fucking sense. I think we want to do that part first, which that kind of kicks up. That's like this. And it's slightly tapered back. It's going. It's almost going. I like to use the Zeus buttons as a reference. At least I can kind of translate, okay, if it's going from that Zeus button to this button, to the Zeus button, then I can take a straight edge and pull it the same on the car. Just scale it up. Uh-oh. Wild cap. Another little thing, cap. So I always end up using like the thin, or the fine line on these, and what happens is these little caps, they pop off. So what I do is, whenever I don't usually use the wider end of the marker, but when these go bad, usually my fine tip goes out first. So what I do is, before I throw the pin away, I take the fine tip cap and I just stash it in my toolbox. So then, like, if I lose a cap, I'm not sitting here digging and waiting, spending time looking for the cap. I just go, all right, I'll find that later. It'll show up when I sweep. And then I just go grab another cap, and it just saves time and shit. So this one goes here, like that. So I think we're safe to do that. I'm not going to use the fine tip. I'm just going to give a general indicator for my tape. And I'm going to go verify again on that. So verify here. So outside to outside, just about. Yeah, outside to outside. So right here. And what I might do too is I might go transfer some of this to the other side, just because there's a lot, and if I just do it step by step on each side, it doesn't end up being as gnarly of a mission to try to get both sides done. I'm kind of already like keeping the steps up side by side. Oops. No, I want to stick up there, huh? Now what do we got here? Points of reference. Consistent. That's a consistent one. That might be an inch down. A little note on there so I can dial that into with the other side. It's a heavy tape. Should have done another print, because I like to hold the straight edge up here on the drawing and actually like zero in. If that's my indicator, I can kind of take the straight edge and put it right up to my line there and just see like where that hits, like just for reference purposes. Like the same with like, doing that, I can look at where that thing's hitting, just different little cues. Same with like that one. I check the Zeus buttons see where they're hitting. So, you know, that's helpful. Obviously, I'm deep in this, and I'm not going to stop to go make more prints. I'm going to keep going, but it would be nice to have another one where I could have like a grid system set up that would enable me just to like really draw on this thing and have a reference. But I want to preserve this just so I can see the overall flow it has. All right, most of this stuff's all the main profile lines. So top line, inlets for the ventilation panels, everything's chunked out. So there's been like several adjustments. You can see I've kind of gone through the ringer just trying to get things right and get them correlating with the render as much as possible. The next thing we got to do, Colin's already kind of helped me solidify some of these radiuses. Just because it does get a little tricky down by the, you know, the exhaust area there. There's some weird dark arch shit going on there. So I think we got it where it comes down and then kind of does a progressive swoop and almost straight again, and then a little hook radius here. So that's what we have. We have a you know, a line diagonal going down. This is the return kind of matching it, going straight again, and then I'm gonna pop another radius. So right now, the next step is getting radiuses, you know, on all the corners. The thing with this is the radiuses are so big that your normal circle guide usually goes to like 3.5 inches or so. And I'm a peasant, so I don't have huge laser cut circle guides or anything. So I just use inanimate objects to get radiuses, like these big cutoff wheels, or a 6-inch DA pad. So this is gonna do a couple for sure. This is like my go-to with bigger stuff. Some stuff I have to do by hand with folding a straight edge. And then if I have something on this that's really pressing, that needs to be a really consistent edge and transferred, or a consistent radius that needs to be transferred to the other side, I might just cut something out of template paper with like a compass, lay it out with a compass to the diameter I want, and then just cut it, and I'll just stuff it in my junk box, or junk drawer in my toolbox, and save it for later. Transfer the 7-inch wheel template to chipboard, just because I can't get in where the exhaust saddles are. And there's the other way you want to cut this stuff is with a cutting mat and a utility knife or an X-Acto knife. Layout lines for bead rolling are a crucial thing you got to take your time with. I mean, we've kind of covered it already in the mesh panel episode, but you know, using a fine tip is a must, just so you're not doing drunk driving. Using the roller, and also just the smoother of a line you have translates directly into how smooth the bead roll and your final rip is going to be. Front kind of dialed. All this stuff I kind of go back and forth, so I look at the shape here, look, all right, well, how tight does it really look on the sketch? Obviously, like that doesn't look like a full radius to me. That looks like it kind of radiuses and then comes drawn, like it draws tension down towards the bottom. It's not just a radius hit. So that's what we have here. We kind of have, this is just a straight edge that's been formed. I just hold it where I want it and then draw it out. These are obviously, well, this guy's our big 7-inch diameter. That one's done by hand. 7-inch, 6-inch. We'll do another one by hand right here because that's like a smooth transition. That's this portion here. So we're almost there. I'm gonna lay this whole thing out and then I'm gonna have to bite the bullet and go lay out the other side. I don't want to. I'd rather just do all the bead rolling and see what it looks like, but it's just gonna be better. Primarily because if I do the bead rolling on this side first, I won't be able to accurately measure where my layout lines are to transfer to the other side because I'll have like a big step in them. So it is what it is. Hopefully later this evening I can start putting shape into these things. I don't know about even that one's tricky. I like this one. It's probably gonna work. But I need to preserve it, make it out of template paper because it's tape, so it'll just constantly change its diameter. I really want to jump the gun and just bead roll this portion just to get it done. It's got like a cool little shape. I'm so wanting to just get this whole side executed, but it's gonna screw me if I don't have these panels just like this to transfer to the other side. So just wrapping up the radius on this upper portion where the mesh is gonna go. This and the front are the last portions I have, and then we're off to transferring the other side. And I got some good methods as far as how to transfer lines on stuff like that too. A lot of this stuff I do out of feel, so you'll have to figure out your own design, but this is where I just do things based off of what feels right. We're locked in. I transferred this portion of the rear into the actual car. I used the rest of the layout though, we're all dialed on that. I don't have the front portion done here, but everything else laid out. There's our rear section. This thing's kind of weird right here. I don't know if I'm gonna drop out or not. So now I'm gonna work on transferring over to the other side. Some of the simple shapes, or simple like measurements I can take, especially like, you know, for instance, if these areas are parallel. So, you know, I know I can just rip some measurements. Like I can rip this measurement, follow that parallel. Like these are all pretty easy. Same with this portion. Like that's all a parallel thing, so that's easy stuff to do. I can just kind of grid off. It's really just about like taking your layout lines and drawing a line through and just picking up a point of measurement everywhere where you want to be. Now I got a couple little dashes with circles around them to indicate where my shapes are, but I'm gonna start laying lines in this thing because if I don't now, it's gonna get really clustered and confusing. And I go slow with the fine tip just to actually put some ink into this thing. If you go fast, it'll just, it won't saturate the aluminum. You can also twist the pin and that'll kind of the tip starts to clog up, it'll free the tip up, it'll kind of clean it over and over. Almost done with all the layout except for the A-pillar front panels. I got to transfer, I just have a couple more radius to do. Radii. The ventilation panel's done, the rear panel's done. I have almost everything done to pull these things off. And then we're going to spend some time with the lone bead roller here. I rolled this bad boy out. It's one of my greatest investments. So I'm ready to kind of attack all that stuff. What we're gonna do is attack the hardest area first. Hardest area for me that seems the most complicated is gonna be this return area. I'm gonna walk to the other side so there's a little more room to look at it. So we have a leading edge of the A-pillar that's covered up now. You know, obviously if you had a panel here and a panel here, then you kind of leave some room if you hit some bushes or something, you know, stuff can get stuck in here. So it's nice to have a panel that's kind of a wraparound thing, and I have a pretty solid MO of doing that with panel setups. So I want to attack this whole area. So this panel in general, some stuff I really need to watch with the bead rolling is going to be the depth sensitivity. So just figuring out the correct amount of depth and then setting the bead roller to that depth every time I put a new panel in, because there is a lot of leading edges that have to be continuous from one panel to the other. So if the depth setting is different, it'll be very apparent once the panels meet up. That's pretty much it right now. I just, like I said, I think I'm gonna do each side, you know. So I'll take like driver's side, I'll do this panel, then I'll go to passenger side, I'll take the same thing, I'll do it, and that retains like my muscle memory and my flow to keep each panel similar, you know, instead of like doing this whole thing and forgetting maybe there was some kind of special technique I had to do on this side to get through some of this. And instead of like working a bunch more panels, I'll work this panel and then I'll go over and I'll get the same one done. So boom, done, it's out and I'm fresh. And then I go to the next one and I just do the same thing. And you know, it's the same thing with like the layout and the bead roll and efficiency. And I always try to preach about that, is like, do all of the same thing at once. You know, it's just like if you had you're building something, you'd make a cut list and then you would make all your cuts at once, and then you have to miter something, you'd make the miters, and you kind of, and then you have to prep stuff, so then you prep it all, and it's the same thing with this. So you know, do all the layout first. The one thing I didn't do is this layout, and that's easy peasy. I'm gonna just get all the big chunked out stuff, but that's like, I'm not sure about my design on that. I'm just gonna let it settle for a little bit. But you know, get all the layout done like we did, transfer it over to the other side, then get the bead roller out and just do all the step rolls, you know, and then once it comes time to do the cutouts, then do all the cutouts at once. And then, you know, we can go back and we'll verify all the edges and make sure everything is parallel where it needs to be on the perimeters of the car. And then I'll roll everything at once and make it grasp the chassis. So here we go. I kind of have an open area. The platform is an absolute necessity with bead rolling stuff to get proper panels and not have to work hard for it. Well, I want to put a pretty big step into the panel, so that means like the side profile, if you were to look at it, it's probably going to be a 1/4 to 5/16 of an inch deep. Sometimes that'll add some deforming on the panels, but I'm going to ride that line very tightly as far as doing that. Another really important thing is to always have really good light. I used to have like a magnetic light that would hang here at the same time that we have on the bandsaw. If I don't give a shit, so they have like other lights in the use. I would always have a light like going right into the middle of this thing is best you can. All right, I'm gonna go sending. I got both of our first panels. These are the front A-pillar panels. There's one portion that's going to be stepped down. It's going to be just for the like the header wraparound guy to recess into. So I'm going to set the step die up to be a little tighter of a space on there than what we're doing for our more stylized bead roll. So I'm going to set the spacing, run through those, and then I'm going to readjust the spacings and start doing all the big shit. The best idea is just to always do a test hit on something, get a piece of aluminum, just run through, make sure that you're set like the way you want. You can even measure your depth like that. Set this, grab a light. So this is a secondary light. I have a primary here, and then I'm going to have a secondary. I'm probably going to pop it in my my ear positioning here with earmuffs on. Oh, this is thick. Hey, if you don't have a bead roller yet and you're looking to get one, always get a heavy duty motor stand. Like just spend the money on a good bead roller. Like just whatever you can get. That's just the best one they make. It'll pay itself forward. It's a nice step, so I'm gonna take that. Bead rolling is one of the harder things. Not harder, but it requires an extreme amount of focus for myself to really stay on a complex radius. Just every single adjustment can lead you into a good place or a bad place. And even with the panel, you know, if you start making a mistake, it's best to not try to immediately correct it. Just slowly start going back to where you want to be on your layout. Because you can sometimes pull that off, but you can't pull off an immediate correction. If you go, whoa, and you pull it back, you're gonna absolutely see that. Sometimes the smoother correction will win. So I just got one little last kick and we're gonna pop out of this panel. Alright, one down. See, that's a nice steep step. Portions are done. That's going to be where our flap goes right over. So A-pillar tube, and then that flap goes over, boom. And then this step is just to keep things like recessed. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to start setting up for our big bead roll stuff. Is this thing zoomed? Oh, that's what it is, sorry. So I'm going to start setting up for that. I always think about the spacing here, so like I know how wide the bead roller die is and the real estate it takes up. So like with the Zeus buttons, I always space it away from there just to not crash into that, because you'll get some really like gnarly surface deformations if you get close to that, or it just won't work at all. That's the same with this spacing. So I know the correct amount of spacing I need to get a die in here without having a conflict. So I'm gonna set this thing up and start sending. So verify, take a second, verify, make sure my step is going the right way. Kind of look at my path, look at the lines, make sure all the layout lines are hitting the same. They're not like on a different plane or layout. Everything is one consistent roadway. So everything does look good. Just where each panel, I don't have them like butted up. So where there is overlap, there's always a little bit of a conflict. So I'll either have to butt them up, or I will run some kind of a program that'll be effective. Check her out. So wrap's done. I just kind of fluffed and buffed it just to get the contrast. I like the orbital sander, a DA, a dual action sander, gives it that look. But I like to do that if I have a seam that I want to kind of check. I can really check my fitment and check the gap and just see if I have inconsistency, as I see a little dip here. But overall, like especially the tricky part, it came out pretty good. So 1 in, 2 in. I'm gonna pop the this mid portion. It's kind of big. It's gonna be a tricky section. It might not fit through my bead roller. I might get stuck and have to like flip the dies and do some dark art shit just to get it to work. But yeah, I want to get these guys done, get the rear done. The other side's done just like this. And then what we'll do is, this is what I need to figure out, is the overlap. You can see there's overlap there. So I don't know, I might just roll the edge over. It's not terrible. It just needs to be fit a little better. So those are things to figure out. Same with this. This is the same kind of deal. So just want to verify all that stuff. I can see already that it needs some help. So let's go. So what you can do with this, let's say what I'm gonna do here. So I'm gonna do a pre-run. I am going to kind of take this and just run it through the bead roller in a way to verify that I can actually get this with, you know, that's why it's important to get a deep throat. Whoa, go on, gowl. To get a deep throat here. So then when you're doing bigger panels and you have especially like a split bead roll layout down the middle, that it can fit in here. So let's see, I'm gonna move these guys. Go through here. Get that. We're gonna get all of it. So that one's good. That's where it gets close. Right there, we got enough. You can see it's coming out of the throat right there. We still got an inch to clear. So we're in a good spot. I'm gonna go sending. Yeah, start around here so you can see this thing's seamless. Got some really good rolls on here. Knock on wood or whatever, I haven't had any mistakes with the bead rolling yet. So I'm sure we'll find some mistakes somewhere else, because you know what? No matter what project I do, there's always one mistake. Big or small, there's always something. They say no one's perfect, and I definitely am not perfect, and there's always something that bites me. But that's part of just being a good fabricator and designer, is just finding a solution to the problem and just making it go away. So what I'm gonna do now is I am going to solidify our pattern here, right? Our layout for this. This one's cool. I like that this one has a little cut, and I'm gonna stick to this. So I'm gonna get this panel on both sides just to look at it, and then I'm gonna get both of these panels on, driver and passenger, and set up some layout so we can get that worked and cut. I put little check marks on the line. If I have several here that I've done and I need to indicate one, I just put little check marks. Sometimes I'll circle it too, just to say, hey, Morgan, that's the one you need. Like, this one's really confusing. So circle those. I'm gonna need to have some auxiliary help to get this right. Some serious chaos going on this one. So I wanted this thing to represent the picture, but also have like a run down front rop, like kind of come through, tighten, progressive swoosh, rop. So I got that. I wanted it to kind of dip down in a little hook. So that's just kind of me figuring out what works. The next thing is going to be figuring out how to get this thing in the bead roller. I have a really substantial break here. I'm going to put the table down. For the bead roll I need to perform, I got it just enough where it's going to slip through the throat on this thing. I got to have the table off, but other than that, it's going to work. So yeah, I'm going to send it. Got this thing where we want it. I do want to pop the brake in that I took out. This angle is a lot less now than it was. I want to make sure that the panel itself is okay once I do that. We do have the planishing hammer just in case. Thanks, Rod. But yeah, I'm happy with what we got here. One more and then we're going to start doing cutouts. Gotta find the hard points where on each panel it's gonna be the same. and then pull from there. A lot of that time it involves not just going off of your bead roll, but drawing a line all the way through it. Kind of pick up what plane it's on. Same with this guy, I'll draw them all the way through. And I'll like measure, let's say from the break. So bottom to the break, 14 7/8. So you see like these openings where I have the mesh detail, that is gonna be like, there's a highlight on there kind of where the white, like the panel is on there. I want them to have more dimension than just being a cutout. And usually when you just cut that shape, it's just flat and then the mesh goes in there. But what I did with this stuff is I bead rolled it, meaning I put that step in there. So that being said, it's gonna leave an edge. I'm gonna still bolt the stuff in, still gonna be behind the panel, but I'm gonna cut on the bottom portion of that step so it leaves like a dimensional edge. It's gonna still bolt to it. I don't think it's gonna deform the mesh enough to where it's gonna like have an indentation, you know, because it's not gonna be mounted fully flush. But it's something I'm willing to figure out, and even if I have to run the mesh through the bead roller to get that step, I'm gonna do it. So right now I'm just gonna do my standard cutout practicing for all of our openings, and then probably do some hole layout too, so we're done. And then my goal is to just finish this thing, all the panels out today. Last panel for cutouts, and then we're gonna start fitting these in the truck, in the chassis. There's some issues. I think I'm already gonna have an overlap, but these are looking really good. So I'm gonna finish this one out. The process is the same thing I do with like if you look at the Fab Diaries, the mesh cutout episode, same process. So I'm gonna run through this one, lay all the panels out, kind of look at them, and then set them in the car. All the cutouts from like mesh stuff like this, where you know you're gonna put mesh panels in, well, this is for another piece. If you do a clean cut, like you're not making this thing in multiple pieces, then you can just use this as your template to lay on top of the mesh or the, you know, the perforated metal as your cut guide. You know, you just need to add. So this is our driver's side. Passenger. The goal is to take these things off and put them on as few times as possible. So take as many notes as you can, make as many adjustments in one pull as possible, and put it back on so you're not like, oh, this needs a little, and then you take that off. And then you put it back on. Oh, this needs a little, go through, mark all that shit. Mark everything you can get in one hole, pull them off, put them on, because it can turn into something crazy if you're just, you know, shitting the bed with the efficiency. This run, I'm gonna verify the overlaps. I'm also gonna verify the edges because I wanna start fluffing and buffing these things and beautifying them. So I need to make sure that all my hard adjustments are done and these are ready for their next phase. So I'm just taking notes on everything here. It's my final notes. I'm not gonna put the stuff back on the car. I'm just gonna make my adjustments and then set these things up for their next round of finish work. I do the fine adjustments and I put an X where they are, so then when I get it onto the table, I know and I'm not just like confused looking for them. It's kind of just a quick indicator. It's time for fluff and buff. Gonna rip these panels. Everything's gonna rip these panels. Everything is kind of trimmed up. All the layout marks that I need to finish are finished. So now I'm gonna beautify these things all the way home. The one thing I am gonna leave out right now is the hole locations for the woven stainless mesh that'll be going in the front area and the like the shock area and the cooling area. That's gonna be a special layout that needs to be done on the truck, and I'm going to do that once we get the material and kind of get further along. So the windshield stuff is gonna be our next project, and then I'll include that mesh when the time comes. Got a piece of paper and it's flimsy and you shake it around and then you just put like a fold in it, or even if you crumple it up in a ball and then you like stretch it back out, it's so much more rigid. And it's really the same theory with a panel. You know, a panel doesn't have any integrity, it's just a flat piece of paper. When you pop a step in it, that's what gives it the rigidity. And the spoiler or the tank hole that's on the outer perimeters, that doesn't really add the rigidity. It really helps just kind of spring load the thing with buttons, because the Zeus button is a spring loaded fastener. So it kind of keeps tension on everything and it doesn't make everything rattle around, and it also seals off the chassis pretty well. Going banana. The panel, you can see that's kind of curving like that. It's not a big deal. It's optimal. If you do it the other way where it's upside down, it's doing it, but since you're putting this onto a flat surface, it's almost happier with a curve like that. It kind of tightens the corners up. Last thing we want to do is hit these with a dual action orbital sander, or a DA, or a DAW, or as the body shop dudes would say, a jitterbug. But just going to clean everything up. It's going to add that two-tone sheen to it. It's kind of a signature MCD1 program we have, and then I'm going to slap these on the car. Once we finish everything on here, I will put hex style Zeus buttons in. I just have a slew of mock-up Zeus buttons, just so it's just like new hardware. If you're gonna put nuts and bolts on stuff, just use mock-up stuff until final assembly, and then use fresh stuff so you're not, you know, messing them up or putting wear and tear on them. Same with the Zeus buttons. I'll get hex style replacements throughout, along with mesh. I want to finish our, I'm gonna call it a hood mohawk. We're gonna do ventilation panels behind the seats, nice roof scoop, radius windshield. So this is like phase one of this Truggy refresh. Gonna get all these going and then shut her down. There is a particular order on here. I did favor the front header compartment panel as well as the rear suspension panel. Those are both like modular, where they come off before these middle ones, like the seat panel here and the foot control panel. That comes off after this. So if you need to, you're going to need to service or get into that area where the engine and the accessories are, and get to the shocks, the nitrogen, the reservoirs, the compression tubes, rebound tubes, all that stuff. That is going to be something you'd want to get to first. So it just made sense to make sure that that panel, you know, is prioritized, and that panel is prioritized, where you're not having to pull off excess panels to get to the one that you want off. Here she is. So all of our side panels are done. Let's call it 80%. Why I say that, there is some areas that I want to finesse, like there's just detail areas that need to be accounted for. You can see, like, I have some indicators on here already. I just do something bold like this that I can wipe off with a Sharpie, where it draws my attention, like where I need to find this. Like, so obviously this is a corner that's sharp here. I want that somewhat rounded off and consistent with the rest of the edges. This guy needs to be rolled more because it's got some gappage in here that I don't like. That's this whole edge. There's arrows down here. This kind of area isn't finished off how I want it to be. It's got like a gap in here just from this weird cap tube here. So these are just like my detail areas. The thing is, I'm gonna have to take these off no matter what to pop the stainless mesh in here. Like I've mentioned, the goal with panels for myself is to try to alleviate the amount of times you gotta take them on and off. If you can do a bunch of stuff in one fell swoop, you know, take them all off and take a bunch of notes and make adjustments and finalize some, you know, several things at once, that's the ticket. And sometimes, you know, it's just a way of thinking to get that right. And that's what I'm gonna do with these. With that being said, I wait. And so once we have not just the sides here and the front done, but there's also gonna be that big mesh back wall. So that's gonna get finalized first, and then that's gonna enable me to figure out what kind of square footage I need for the wire mesh. And I'm gonna do it all in one fell swoop. The layout, like I was talking about, is just you want to lay this stuff out on the car so you don't shoot yourself in the foot. Because if I did like I drilled a hole in this panel and I think a piece of hardware is going to go here, or hardware is going to go here, or here where these tubes are, you're shitting the bed. So you want to do it strategically where you get a really good grid system, but you don't do stuff where you shoot yourself in the foot and you put hardware locations in areas where it's not accessible for a bolt to go through. I really like the front detail here. I think my favorite part so far on the shapes and on the car are the like this shape here, you know, and even from the front, it's just got a really nice presence there. Once that's all meshed in where it's kind of transparent, the exhaust comes through, and it's the same on each side. It's just got a really good feeling there. So our first phase is done on this thing. The reskin, the initial reskin and consolidating the panels, executing our design, executing the layout into the panels, and finishing them off with the signature two-tone is all complete for now. Like I said, we do need to detail some areas. Once we get the roof scoop and the radius flush windshield in and that back wall in, then I will go through and kind of detail this thing out and finalize everything. We're going to cover all this stuff in the Fab Diaries, and then we're going to do some updates along the way as well with the car overall. If you guys see some stuff here that you want us to cover and that catches your eye, let us know. Again, please like and subscribe. Thank you for the continued support, and we're just going to keep this thing going. So I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks. Go and drop it. Go on, big time dropping.